Hi, everybody. My name is Nora, and I'm super excited to talk with you today about some of the work we've been doing at the KIPP Foundation. In case KIPP is new to you, Mike, if you could drive us to the next slide. Thank you. KIPP is a national organization of public nonprofit charter schools. We have 278 schools across the country and serve approximately 190,000 students. So our mission is here on the screen, and the mission of our pilot is trying to figure out how and when AI should be a part of the learning journey of students, because we don't want to just leave it up to when kids decide they want to try working with AI to improve their writing. We know that kids are going to work with it, and we want to figure out how to do that the best way that they can. So the first 18 years at the KIPP Foundation, we spent most of our time with regions working independently from each other in really discrete silos based on regions. And over the past couple of years, we have endeavored to make KIPP a more cohesive organization where we can learn from the best practices in all of the 278 schools and spread and scale those to all of our schools. So that's what we're up to with this writing pilot, is working on bringing the best of KIPP to all of KIPP, so we can study where our bright spots are and then leverage them across our organization. We started in this best of KIPP to all of KIPP world in the science of reading and strong foundational literacy skills. So we started with using things like the Dibbles assessment and letters training and common curricula, all wrapping around foundational literacy skills so that our kids have the right foundation that they need to be able to engage in higher level content later. What we saw is that when we had really clear, robust data, is we were able to see the bright spots. Mike, if you want to go to the next slide, that's what that image is representing, is like when we had data that told us what was working and for whom and under what conditions, we could identify the bright spot and then replicate it in other places. And so this comes from looking into the Dibbles data that is on the next slide and finding where those green bars are and studying the teachers and classrooms and regions where we're seeing green so that we can recreate those conditions elsewhere. We also know that when we tried down this road for replicating the best of KIPP to all of KIPP in writing, we were met immediately with a bunch of roadblocks because we did not have access to normed data sets that let us see the bright spots. We know that there are people out there that do this work of norming on student writing and figuring out where there are the strongest pieces of writing. If, for example, the College Board spends millions of dollars every year to have a norm data set that they can stand confidently and say, these are the strongest writing examples for this discipline at this grade level. We also have some internal examples of where we've worked to get strong norming processes in place, but then as there's teacher attrition or leader attrition, those processes are not long-term stable. So when we started to look for how do we find the bright spots, we knew that we needed to identify a solution that allowed us to do the same kind of work that the College Board does, only without spending millions of dollars a year to do it. So that brings us a bit to like what we're doing now and why. We are trying to tackle this challenge of writing assessment data to get comparable data across regions, across states, so that we can study those outcomes and replicate the best. But we really needed to have a way to establish norm data sets and then track growth over time, which we just didn't have a way to do when we were all operating in those silos that I mentioned at the beginning, when we were operating by region. And when we tried to do this, we ran into a couple of roadblocks that I'm sure are familiar to you. On the next slide, Mike, way that we tried to get feedback is the way that we were trying to get normed is thinking about how to get kids feedback right away. So teachers norming across the grade level on what outcomes look like for this lesson and everybody giving feedback in the moment, or feedback within a week of students submitting their writing. And as we tried to tackle this problem, we just actually generated more problems. Like the issue of teacher sustainability, as we're trying to ramp up the amount of feedback that students are getting, our teachers are facing a mountain of papers each day, which does not allow for really thoughtful commenting and really thoughtful feedback. It just incentivizes shallow feedback, which then gets us like out of the cycle that we're working towards ending. So the pilot that we're running this year that I'm excited to talk with you about is set up with this structure. So we are working with 2 curricula that all of our regions are using, Fish Tank and Novel, and we're integrating the writing revolution strategies into those curricula and using EnlightenAI to help us find the bright spots. So we're training a series of assignments and rubrics so that as teachers use this to get their kids feedback, we can also see in a normed way where there is excellence and where there are places that we need to support teachers to figure out how to support their kids. And here's how things are going so far. Here's what we've learned. The pilot has just started this year, so we're in the very beginning stages of learning. We're hoping over the course of the year to improve our students' writing fluency and rubric scores in all grades 3 through 10, and to improve our students' writing confidence in their ability. We are looking at all of our data disaggregated by race, gender, multilingual language learners, and IEP status, and keeping our eye on not having any outliers in any of those disaggregated groups. And then we are trying to identify what are the right benchmarks for our schools moving into next year. We have 4 regions participating this year, Baltimore, DC, New Jersey, and Boston. So we're really excited to partner with those regions and schools to learn. The pilot is designed to be, writing is at the center of all of learning for kids. So writing is the best way that we can assess student thinking. So we are really leaning into writing as sort of the hub of the wheel that we will then be able to like spread out to all of our content areas. The idea here is that we did not want to engage with an AI scoring tool that was content specific or curriculum specific, because we want to be able to use the system that we're building in all of our content areas when we are ready to do so. So that's part of the reason why Enlighten was such a strong option for us, because it allows us to teach and train the AI to score in the ways that we want it to, and it's not specific to a curriculum. Okay. Here are the things that we were specifically looking for in our AI partner. And I want to highlight the writing fluency metrics as one of the biggest things that we wanted to be able to measure using AI. Research suggests that writing fluency is one of the biggest roadblocks that often doesn't get addressed because there, to this point, hasn't been a great way to capture and sustainably measure writing fluency. And we believe that there's a parallel between the oral reading fluency and unlocking reading comprehension to writing fluency, unlocking really in-depth thinking and writing. And so one of the reasons that Enlighten was such a strong partner for us was because of the way that they thought about and were able to incorporate writing fluency into the tool. There are 4 big buckets that we're measuring outcomes in this year. We're looking at writing fluency metrics, writing quality metrics, like how kids are scoring on end of unit assessments using the curriculum rubrics. We're also looking at student surveys and trying to put those pieces next to each other. And as students improve in fluency work, do they also improve in confidence? As they improve in rubric scores, do they also improve in confidence? And how do we know? And then the last bucket of data that we're looking at closely is just the equity analysis for outcomes disaggregated to ensure that we're not leaving any of our students behind as we move forward. We are just scratching the iceberg or scratching the tip of the iceberg with what we have learned so far. Some big things that we have learned, even just from the beginning of the year, is that there's wide variation across our network and significant variation across grade levels. So you can see some of the initial data here at the bottom. Writing fluency, as we suspected, has emerged as one of the things that is really holding our students back, because if they can't fluently express any ideas in writing, then it's almost impossible to express those more complex thoughts that we're asking them to write in response to grade level texts. So we have spent the beginning of the year working on identifying the clear patterns and starting to put practices in the water that will support students with their writing fluency using sentence level work that's rooted in the Writing Revolution coursework. Some of our big lessons learned so far are that students are really hungry for feedback. I think there was a sense that our teachers had a sense that their kids would be pushing back on the idea of like engaging with AI feedback, and it has been quite the opposite. The more that kids engage with AI feedback that is well trained, and therefore not just giving feedback on mechanics, but giving feedback on their ideas, the more kids want that feedback. We used to like walk into a classroom and see half of our students waiting for feedback from a peer or from a teacher. And now the students are able to immediately engage with the feedback and start perfecting what they are trying to say. We also have learned that fluency data unlocks what we can do in terms of support. It helps us really understand where our struggling students are struggling. And we would not have had that data if we weren't grading with AI. And that data also allows us to set goals. So over the course of the year, we're gathering and disaggregating data so that we can set some benchmarks for where we hope our students will be by the end of the year, as well as where they should be by next year. So our plan is that this year we're in this like current pilot phase, lots of learning and refinement of the tool. And next year we're hoping to expand that pilot a little bit, get even more regions in pilot mode, and expand to all of the teachers in our pilot regions. And then hoping to bring these same practices to our entire networking community by the 2027 school year.